The Kethari War fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a plague of metal locusts. 300 ships, each one a kilometer-long instrument of death, their hulls gleaming with the cold light of distant stars. Admiral Zextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Voidrender, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. This would be another easy conquest for the galactic hegemony. Earth hung before them like a blue jewel, unaware that its destruction was only hours away. The humans had been observed for decades, catalogued as a primitive species barely capable of interplanetary travel. Their largest ships were crude metal boxes that burned chemical fuel. Their weapons were projectile-based, laughably primitive compared to plasma cannons and antimatter torpedoes. The hegemony's xenobiologists had classified them as Category 7, minimal threat. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the third planet," reported Communications Officer Veldar, his four eyes focused on the display. They appeared to be surrender negotiations? Zextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. How refreshingly efficient. Most species require at least a demonstration of our firepower before they grovel. The first transmission crackled through the bridge speakers. A human female appeared on screen, her face composed despite the circumstances. "This is Secretary General Chun of the United Earth Government. We know why you're here. We're prepared to discuss terms." "Standard procedure," Zextar commanded. "Demand unconditional surrender. Explain that resistance is futile. Give them 1 hour to comply before we begin orbital bombardment." As the message was transmitted, Zextar studied the human homeworld through the ship's sensors. Cities sprawled across the continents, twinkling with lights. Orbital stations dotted the space around Earth, primitive but numerous. A few small ships moved between them, going about their daily business as if an invasion fleet hadn't just arrived in their system. What struck him as odd was the complete lack of military response. No defensive fleets scrambled to meet them. No massive shield generators powered up. No planet-cracking weapons emerged from hidden bunkers. The humans simply continued their routine activities. "Sir," Veldar interrupted his thoughts. "We're receiving the human response." Secretary General Chin appeared again, this time flanked by several other humans in formal attire. "We've discussed your terms, Admiral. We find them unacceptable. However, we have a counter-proposal." Zextar's laugh was a harsh chittering sound. "These creatures think they can negotiate? Put me through to them directly." The view screen shifted to show the human delegation. Chin's dark eyes met his without flinching. "Admiral, I'm going to share something with you that might change your perspective on this situation. We know about the hegemony. We know about the dozens of worlds you've conquered. We know about your standard tactics and your technological capabilities." "Impossible," Zextar snarled. "Your species has never left this system." "That's not entirely true," Chin replied calmly. "We haven't left this system with ships you could detect. But we've been watching. We've been learning. And we've been preparing." The Admiral's confidence wavered slightly. Intelligence reports had been absolute. Humans were confined to their solar system, their technology centuries behind hegemony standards. Yet something in the human's tone suggested she knew far more than she should. "Sir," his tactical officer suddenly called out, alarm evident in his voice. "I'm detecting some kind of energy buildup throughout the human system. Multiple sources, but I can't identify the technology." On the main screen, Chun continued speaking as if she could hear their bridge chatter. "You see, Admiral, we humans have a particular talent. When we know something is coming for us, we prepare. When we know we're outgunned, we get creative. When we know we're going to be attacked, we make sure the attacker regrets it." Zextar's four arms tensed against his command chair. "Elaborate scans, all sensors. I want to know what we're dealing with." The scanner results began flooding in, and, with each reading, Zextar's confidence crumbled a little more. Energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. Massive structures hidden throughout the asteroid belt, invisible to conventional sensors. And something else, something that made his blood run cold. "Sir," the sensor operator whispered, "according to these readings, there are humans throughout the galaxy. Not just this system. They've been hiding among us for decades." Chin smiled on the view screen. "Now you're beginning to understand. This isn't first contact, Admiral. This is a reckoning." The bridge of the Void Render erupted into chaos as proximity alarms began wailing. Red warning lights bathed the crew in an ominous glow, while tactical displays showed impossible readings. Admiral Zextar's 4 arms gripped his command chair as his world turned upside down. "Report," he barked, his translator struggling to convey his growing panic. "Sir, we have multiple contacts appearing throughout our formation," the tactical officer stammered, his scales pale with fear. They're materializing inside our defensive perimeter." The main viewscreen split into dozens of smaller displays, each showing a different section of the Cathari fleet. What Zextar saw defied everything he knew about space warfare. Sleek, dark ships were simply appearing next to his vessels, emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. They moved with impossible grace, their hulls reflecting no light, as if they absorbed the very photons that struck them. "Impossible," Zextar whispered. "Teleportation technology is theoretical at best. The energy requirements alone." "Sir," Communications Officer Velder interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel." A new figure appeared on screen, a tall human male with graying hair and steel blue eyes. He wore a simple black uniform without rank insignia, but carried himself with undeniable authority. "I am Captain Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Corps," the human said, his voice calm and steady. "Admiral Zextar, I presume. We need to talk." "You will surrender immediately," Zextar snarled, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Your primitive ships are no match for hegemony technology." Webb's expression didn't change. "Admiral, let me explain something about humanity. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've perfected the art of killing each other with everything from sharpened sticks to weapons that split atoms. When we finally reached for the stars and discovered we weren't alone, we didn't celebrate. We prepared for war." As if on cue, the dark human ships began moving. They didn't accelerate gradually like normal spacecraft. They simply shifted position instantaneously, one moment here, the next moment there. The Cathari sensors couldn't track their movements, couldn't predict their next position. Evasive maneuvers. Zextar commanded. "All ships, open fire." The hegemony fleet responded with centuries of military precision. Plasma cannons erupted in brilliant streams of superheated matter. Antimatter torpedoes streaked through space, their targeting systems locked onto the human vessels. For a moment, space blazed with enough firepower to crack a moon. Then, something extraordinary happened. The human ships didn't dodge the incoming fire. They absorbed it. The plasma streams struck their hulls and simply vanished, as if the ships were made of some impossible material that converted energy into nothing. The antimatter torpedoes hit their targets and detonated with the force of small stars. But when the light faded, the human vessels remained untouched. "What are they made of?" Zextar demanded. "Sir," the science officer reported, his voice shaking, "the humans appear to be using some form of exotic matter manipulation. They're not just absorbing our weapons' energy, they're converting it into something else entirely." Captain Webb's voice echoed through the bridge again. 50 years ago, Admiral, we discovered the wreckage of a hegemony scout ship in the outer reaches of our solar system. Your people had been watching us, studying us, preparing to add us to your empire. That wreck told us everything we needed to know about your technology, your tactics, and your weaknesses. On the tactical display, Zextar watched in horror as his ships began reporting system failures. Engines shutting down without explanation. Weapons systems going offline. Life support flickering. The human vessels weren't even firing back, yet his fleet was being systematically disabled. "We spent 5 decades preparing for this day," Webb continued. "We developed new physics, new technologies, new ways of thinking about space and time. We built ships that exist partially outside normal reality. We created weapons that don't destroy, but rather convince matter that it doesn't want to exist anymore." "This is impossible," Zextar repeated, but his protests sounded hollow even to his own ears. "We also did something else during those 50 years, Webb said, and for the first time, his expression hardened. "We infiltrated your empire. Humans are remarkably adaptable, Admiral. We learned your languages, studied your cultures, underwent genetic modification to pass among your people. We've been living on your worlds, working in your governments, serving in your fleets." The implication hit Zextar like a physical blow. If humans had infiltrated the hegemony, then they knew everything. Ship designs, defensive positions, military protocols, even the location of the homeworlds. How many? He whispered. Enough, Webb replied. We've been patient, Admiral. We've watched your empire grow fat and complacent. We've seen how you treat the species you conquer, how you strip worlds of resources and reduce proud civilizations to slave labor. Humanity has decided that your reign of terror ends today. As if summoned by his words, new contacts began appearing on the tactical display, not just around Earth, but throughout known space. Human ships were materializing near every major hegemony installation, every fleet base, every conquered world. The scale of the operation was staggering, coordinated across thousands of light years in perfect synchronization. You see, Admiral, Webb said softly, you made one critical error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed we were primitive because we hadn't left our solar system. You never considered that perhaps we simply hadn't wanted to leave. Not until we were ready. Not until we could guarantee that when we finally stepped onto the galactic stage, we would never be victims again. Admiral Zextar's flagship shuddered as its primary systems continued failing one by one. The bridge lights flickered between normal illumination and emergency power, casting eerie shadows across the faces of his terrified crew. Through the viewports, he could see his mighty fleet hanging dead in space, their hulls dark and lifeless. Sir, his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Human forces have appeared simultaneously at every major installation. The fortress worlds, the core systems, even the Imperial capital itself. Captain Webb's image remained steady on the main screen, watching the destruction of the Kethari fleet with calm satisfaction. Admiral, I want you to understand what's happening here. This isn't just an attack on your invasion force. This is the systematic dismantling of your entire empire. Impossible, Zextar snarled, though his confidence had long since evaporated. The hegemony spans 12,000 worlds. You cannot possibly coordinate an assault of that magnitude. You're thinking in terms of your technology, Webb replied. Classical physics, relativistic constraints, the need to move information at light speed. We abandoned those limitations decades ago. When you exist partially outside normal space-time, communication becomes instantaneous across any distance. As if to demonstrate his point, new displays materialized around the bridge, showing scenes from across the galaxy. Hegemony battleships floating powerless around their homeworlds. Orbital defense platforms dark and silent. Ground installations evacuating in panic as their weapons refused to function. How? Zextar demanded. Our technology is advanced beyond anything your species should be capable of understanding. Webb's expression grew thoughtful. Do you know what happened when humanity first split the atom, Admiral? We used it to end the greatest war our species had ever known. 2 bombs, 2 cities, hundreds of thousands dead in an instant. It was terrible, but it taught us something vital about ourselves. The human captain paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. We learned that we are capable of both incredible destruction and incredible restraint. We could have turned our entire planet into radioactive ash within months of that discovery. Instead, we chose to use that power to reach for the stars. On the tactical display, Zextar could see human ships moving through his fleet like phantoms. They weren't destroying the Kethari vessels, merely disabling them. Weapons systems drained of power, engines shut down, life support maintained, but nothing else. It was precise, surgical, and somehow more terrifying than simple destruction. When we found your scout ship, Webb continued, we faced the same choice. We could have used your technology to become conquerors ourselves, to build our own empire among the stars. Or we could choose a different path. And what path was that? Zextar asked, genuinely curious despite his situation. Liberation, Webb said simply. We spent 50 years not just developing weapons to fight you, but studying every species under hegemony control. We learned their languages, their cultures, their histories before you conquered them. We discovered something remarkable, Admiral. Almost every species in your empire was peaceful before you arrived. They were explorers, scientists, artists, philosophers. You turned them into slaves and soldiers. The displays around the bridge shifted, showing scenes that made Zextar's blood run cold. On world after world, human ships were landing near hegemony installations. But they weren't attacking the populations. Instead, they were disabling the control systems that kept the conquered species in line. Communications networks designed to spread propaganda went dark. Orbital weapons platforms that enforced compliance shut down. Prison camps that held political dissidents unlocked their doors. "You're starting a galactic revolution," Zextar realized with growing horror. "We're ending one that should have happened centuries ago," Webb corrected. "The Kethari aren't evil, Admiral. You're products of a system that rewards aggression and punishes compassion. But that system is ending today." Another transmission crackled through the bridge speakers, this one from the Imperial capital itself. Zextar recognized the voice of Supreme Admiral Korthon, leader of the hegemony military. "All forces, this is Central Command. We are under attack by an unknown alien force using technology beyond our current understanding. All ships are ordered to fall back to defensive positions around the core worlds immediately." Webb smiled grimly. "I'm afraid your ships won't be going anywhere, Admiral. We've been very careful to ensure that this transition happens with minimal bloodshed. Your crews are safe, your ships are intact, but your war machine is finished. What do you want from us?" Zextar asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Accountability," Webb replied. "For 300 years, the hegemony has terrorized the galaxy. Billions have died. Entire civilizations have been erased. Countless species have been enslaved. That debt must be paid. You speak of justice while holding our entire fleet hostage," Zextar pointed out. "Yes," Webb agreed without hesitation. "Because justice sometimes requires force. We learned that lesson from our own history, from every tyrant we've ever faced. Sometimes peace can only be achieved through strength." The main display shifted to show a wider view of the Sol system. What Zextar saw there made him understand the true scope of humanity's preparations. Massive construction projects hidden throughout the asteroid belt were coming online, revealing themselves for the first time. Space elevators descended from orbital platforms toward Earth's surface. Ships emerged from what looked like solid asteroids, clearly built inside them over decades of secret construction. "Every human settlement in the galaxy is declaring independence today," Webb announced. "Every infiltration cell is activating. Every sleeper agent is revealing themselves. In the span of a single day, the galactic hegemony will cease to exist." "And what replaces it?" Zextar asked. "Freedom," Webb said. "The species you conquered will govern themselves. Trade will be conducted through negotiation, not force. Disputes will be settled through diplomacy, not warfare. And the Kethari people will have the chance to learn what it means to be part of a galactic community instead of its oppressors." Zextar looked around his bridge at his crew, seeing the fear and confusion in their eyes. They had been raised in a culture that prized strength above all else, that measured success by the number of worlds conquered and species subjugated. The idea of a galaxy based on cooperation rather than domination was almost incomprehensible to them. "You're asking us to abandon everything we've ever known," he said. "No," Webb replied softly. "We're offering you the chance to become something better." 3 weeks had passed since the day the galaxy changed forever. Admiral Zextar stood in what had once been his ready room aboard the Void Render, now serving as a temporary detention facility. The ship's systems remained offline except for life support and communications, courtesy of their human captors. Through the viewport, he could see Earth in all its blue and green glory, a planet that had somehow managed to bring the mighty galactic hegemony to its knees without firing a single shot in anger. The door chimed, and Captain Webb entered, carrying a data pad and wearing the same unadorned black uniform he'd worn during their first encounter. The human looked tired but determined, the weight of commanding the most significant military operation in galactic history evident in the lines around his eyes. "Admiral," Webb said, settling into the chair across from Zextar, "I wanted to speak with you personally before we proceed to the next phase." "The trials," Zextar said flatly. It wasn't a question. For weeks, human ships had been transporting hegemony officials to a massive station that had appeared near Earth's moon, apparently constructed in secret over decades. War crimes tribunals, they called them. "Yes, the trials," Webb confirmed. "But That's not why I'm here. I wanted to show you something first. He activated his data pad, and holographic displays materialized around them, showing scenes from across the galaxy. What Zextar saw challenged everything he thought he knew about the aftermath of conquest. On Veltar Prime, the crystalline cities of the Velte people glowed with renewed life as they rebuilt their ancient cultural centers. Human advisors worked alongside them, not as conquerors but as partners, helping to restore technologies that the hegemony had suppressed for generations. On the industrial world of Carthoem, the insectoid Carthai were dismantling the massive weapon foundries that had been forced upon them, replacing them with research facilities and art galleries. Their natural talents for engineering, previously perverted into instruments of war, were being channeled into exploration vessels and terraforming equipment. "This is impossible," Zextar muttered, watching scene after scene of peaceful reconstruction. When the central authority collapses, there should be chaos. Civil wars, resource conflicts. These species should be at each other's throats. They were before the hegemony conquered them, Webb pointed out. But conquest has a way of giving people perspective on what really matters. When you've all been slaves together, you tend to value freedom more than old grudges. The displays shifted to show other worlds, other species. The aquatic Nephrae were rebuilding their underwater cities, designing them as sanctuaries for refugees from other worlds. The energy-based Quintar were sharing their advanced physics knowledge freely, helping other species develop clean power sources. Everywhere Webb showed him, former enemies were working together. "It's not all perfect," Webb admitted. "There have been conflicts, disagreements about resources and territory. But they're being resolved through negotiation and compromise instead of orbital bombardment." "And what of my people?" Zextar asked quietly. "What happens to the Kethari?" Webb's expression grew serious. "That depends largely on choices made by individuals like yourself, Admiral. The Kethari homeworld is currently under Human Protection Corps oversight, but we're not there as conquerors. We're there to help your people transition to a new way of life." Another hologram appeared, showing the sprawling cities of Kethar. Zextar was surprised to see that they looked much the same as they always had, except for the absence of the massive military installations that had dominated the landscape for centuries. In their place, schools and hospitals were under construction. "Many of your people are struggling with the change," Webb continued. "A culture built on conquest doesn't easily adapt to cooperation. But the younger generation is adapting faster than we expected. They're curious about the galaxy beyond what they were taught, eager to learn about the species they were raised to despise." "And the military caste?" Zextar asked, knowing the answer would be complicated. "Some are adapting well. Your strategic and tactical expertise, when applied to peaceful purposes, is invaluable. We've had Kethari officers help design evacuation procedures for natural disasters, coordinate resource distribution to refugee camps, even help plan exploration missions to uncharted systems." Webb paused, then added more quietly, "Others are having a harder time. There have been several attempted uprisings, groups trying to restart the war. They're being dealt with, but through rehabilitation rather than elimination." Zextar studied the human's face, trying to understand the mind behind it. "Why? Why show mercy to a species that would have exterminated you without hesitation?" "Because mercy is what separates civilization from barbarism," Webb replied simply. "Because every species deserves the chance to choose a better path. Because the moment we become what we fought against, we've already lost everything that made the fight worthwhile." The holographic displays changed again, showing the massive construction projects throughout the Sol system. What had once been hidden were now revealed as the most ambitious engineering undertakings in galactic history. Massive ring habitats around Jupiter, artificial planets in the asteroid belt, generation ships capable of crossing the galaxy in decades rather than millennia. "You've been preparing for more than defense," Zextar observed. "We've been preparing for the future," Webb corrected. "Humanity learned long ago that standing still is the same as moving backward. We knew that defeating the hegemony was only the first step. The galaxy is vast, Admiral. There are probably dozens of other empires out there, other species that might have the same ideas your people did. When they come looking for easy conquests, they need to find a united galaxy ready to defend itself." "A galactic alliance," Zextar said, beginning to understand. More than that, a galactic family. Species working together not because they're forced to, but because they choose to, sharing knowledge and resources and dreams instead of competing for them. Zextar was quiet for a long moment, processing what he'd seen and heard. Finally, he looked up at Webb. "What do you want from me, Captain?" "I want you to testify at the trials," Webb said. "Not as a defendant, but as a witness. Help us understand how the hegemony worked, how decisions were made, how the military hierarchy functioned. Help us ensure that nothing like it can rise again." "In exchange for what?" "A reduced sentence." Webb shook his head. "In exchange for the chance to help build something better. The galaxy is going to need experienced military minds to help design defense systems that protect rather than conquer. It's going to need people who understand strategy to help coordinate relief efforts and exploration missions. It's going to need leaders who know the cost of war to help ensure peace." The humans stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Admiral, your people called humanity a Category 7 threat, minimal danger to the hegemony. You were wrong about our threat level, but you were also wrong about the nature of the threat we posed. We weren't dangerous because we wanted to destroy you. We were dangerous because we refused to become you." After Webb left, Zextar stood alone in his quarters, staring out at the blue world that had changed everything. For the first time in his military career, he found himself contemplating a future without war, a galaxy where strength was measured not by the ability to destroy, but by the wisdom to preserve and protect. It was a terrifying and exhilarating prospect. 5 years after the end of the galactic hegemony, Admiral Zextar stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the massive diplomatic hub that orbited Earth's moon. Through the transparisteel windows, he could see ships from dozens of species docking at the station's numerous ports. Sleek Veltae crystal ships, organic Nephray vessels that looked more grown than built, and the geometric precision of Carthai engineering craft. Among them, barely distinguishable now from the alien designs, were Kethari ships bearing the new insignia of the Galactic Cooperation Council. The transformation still amazed him. What had once been the most feared military fleet in the galaxy now served as part of the Council's Rapid Response Corps, rushing aid to disaster zones and defending peaceful settlements from pirates and raiders. His own ship, the Voidrender, had been completely rebuilt, its weapon systems replaced with medical bays and emergency shelters. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Captain Webb's voice came from behind him. The human had aged noticeably in the past 5 years, gray now dominating his hair, but his eyes still held the same determined kindness that had changed the galaxy. Zextar turned, noting that Webb now wore the deep blue uniform of the Council's Peacekeeping Corps, with insignia marking him as Supreme Commander. "It is indeed, Marcus. Though I sometimes wonder if I'm dreaming." "We all do sometimes." Webb joined him at the window, watching as a massive Kethari transport ship carefully maneuvered into a docking bay designed for vessels half its size. The engineering teams are still learning to work with species that build things differently than they do. And the Kethari crews are still learning to ask for help instead of simply taking what they need. Zextar replied with what humans had taught him to recognize as dry humor. Below them, the station buzzed with activity. In the central plaza, children of a dozen species played together under the watchful eyes of their parents. Zextar had been amazed to discover that many species bore live young as humans did, and that these offspring seemed naturally inclined toward cooperation rather than competition. "The quarterly reports came in yesterday," Webb said, pulling out a data pad. "Food production is up 30% across all member worlds. Scientific collaboration has led to breakthroughs in medical technology that have eliminated 17 major diseases. The Exploration Corps has made peaceful contact with 6 new species in the past year alone." Zextar nodded, but something in Webb's tone suggested there was more. "And the problems?" "The hegemony remnants are becoming more organized," Webb admitted. "Intelligence suggests they're operating out of the dark zone, trying to unite the species that refuse to join the Council. 3 raids on outer colonies in the past month. The Dark Zone was what they called the region of space where several aggressive species had retreated after the hegemony's fall. The Scar-Th, a reptilian race that made the Kethari look peaceful by comparison. The Vorthe, cybernetic beings who viewed organic life as something to be consumed and processed. The next, some energy parasites that fed on the life force of other species. How bad? Zextar asked. Bad enough that the Council is considering military action. Not conquest, Webb added quickly, but intervention to protect innocent populations. Zextar was quiet for a moment, thinking. 5 years ago, I would have seen this as an opportunity to prove Kethari's superiority. Send in the fleet, crush the resistance, establish dominance. And now I see it as a failure of imagination. We haven't found the right way to reach them, to show them what we've built here. Zextar gestured toward the bustling station below. Every species that has joined the Council has benefited. Better technology, better medicine, better quality of life for their people. Why would anyone choose isolation and aggression over this? Webb smiled grimly. Because some cultures are built on the idea that strength comes from making others weak. It's a hard mindset to break. Humans broke it, Zextar pointed out. Humans were forced to break it, Webb corrected. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times before we learned that cooperation was stronger than competition. The SCAR-TH and their allies haven't reached that point yet. They still believe that the galaxy is a zero-sum game. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Webb activated his communicator, and the holographic image of Secretary General Chen appeared. She looked older as well, but her eyes still held the same steel that had faced down an invasion fleet. Marcus, Zextar, I hope you're both sitting down. We've just received a long-range transmission from the Galactic Edge. It's extraordinary. What kind of transmission? Webb asked. A distress call, but not from any species we know. The signal suggests a massive refugee fleet, possibly millions of beings, fleeing something called the Devourers. They're requesting sanctuary and offering to share advanced technologies in exchange for protection. Zextar felt his old military instincts stirring. How advanced? Advanced enough to cross intergalactic space, apparently. This fleet comes from outside our galaxy entirely. They've been traveling for thousands of years, searching for a safe harbor. Webb and Zextar exchanged glances. When will they arrive? Webb asked. 6 months, if their calculations are correct. But there's more. They're not just refugees. They're the survivors of a galactic civilization that spanned their entire galaxy before these devourers consumed it. They have knowledge of technologies we can barely imagine, experience with threats we've never dreamed of. After Chen's image faded, the two former enemies stood in contemplative silence. Finally, Zextar spoke. This changes everything, doesn't it? It changes the scale, Webb agreed. We've been thinking in terms of our galaxy, our local problems. But if there are forces out there capable of consuming entire galaxies, then our little council is going to need to grow up very quickly. Zextar turned from the window, his mind already working through the implications. We'll need to unite every species in our galaxy, including the holdouts in the Dark Zone. We'll need to share every piece of technology, every tactical advantage. And we'll need to do it without becoming the very thing we fought against, Webb added. The moment we start forcing compliance instead of earning cooperation, we become another hegemony. Zextar extended one of his 4 arms in the human gesture of partnership that had replaced the old Kethari dominance displays. Then, we'd better get to work, old friend. It sounds like the galaxy is about to need everything we've learned about turning enemies into allies. Webb grasped his hand firmly. Together? Together, Zextar confirmed. Just like humanity taught us. As they walked away from the observation deck, heading toward the council chambers where representatives of 47 species would soon gather to face their greatest challenge yet, neither of them noticed the small, dark ship that materialized briefly in the shadows of Earth's moon before vanishing again. Its sensors had been observing Unity Station for weeks, gathering intelligence for masters who viewed the growing galactic alliance not as a threat to be confronted, but as a resource to be harvested. The Devourers had found them first. But that, as humans were fond of saying, was a story for another day. Today, the species of the Milky Way would learn whether the bonds they had forged in peace were strong enough to hold in war. Whether the unity they had built from the ashes of tyranny could stand against the darkness between the stars. The galaxy was about to discover just how terrifying a united humanity and its allies could truly be.